Welcome to the Instinctive Influencers podcast, a show where influence becomes one of your tools for success. Now, here are your hosts, Brian Weber and Ed Haley.
Hi, I'm Brian.
And I am Ed.
And this is the Instinctive Influencers podcast. Wow, it's been quite a week, Ed. You, my friend, were on a very lengthy trip, an enjoyable one at that, I would say.
Not lengthy enough, man. I didn't want to come back. I could have stayed there forever, but yes. I just came back from a bucket list trip.
Yeah, you want to tell the listeners what it is you got to go enjoy?
Yeah, I got to spend the 75th anniversary of D-Day in the Normandy region of France, hanging out on the various beaches. Let's see, on the actual anniversary day, the 6th, we were at Utah Beach, and we went to Saint-Mihiel-Église, which is really famous for the paratroopers who landed on the steeple of the church and hung there.
Yeah,
and one who continued to fight from there.
Yeah. Well, I saw the picture that you and your wife put on there. I kind of clicked on the like button because I was like, man, that's just awesome. It's just amazing in itself, but kind of, if you would, and I know this show, it's a little bit about influence. Well, it's a lot about influence, wouldn't you say? But
I would hope so.
What was the kind of what was the kind of influence that you think you personally felt when you were at a place that you have researched and studied so much and you understand so well?
Yeah. So I've read, and I told you this earlier, I've read so many books on D-Day. Recently I was reading Stephen Ambrose's book, D-Day, and I've written papers and I've done schoolwork and all this stuff. But even my wife was saying, you appreciate it, but you don't really appreciate it till you realize the magnitude of it, until you see the size of the cliffs that the Marines scaled, until you see these bunkers, the Germans, the thickness of the concrete that the Germans had to fortify the Atlantic Wall, or the length of these beaches, man. The Canadian beach at Juneau, I don't remember the exact distance, but it was pretty, it was a pretty long beach, and they didn't land with near the size of force as the Americans did at Utah and Omaha, but they still had to fight on this beach. Yesterday, on our last day, we went back to Utah, and we were down where the bluffs are, and you're looking up and you're like, man, these Germans were so high above this beach, and the tide was out, and you're like, these guys are coming up this beach with zero cover other than obstacles, which are not that thick. Trust me, I looked at a lot of them. And they're just taking this withering fire, and not to be shameless plug for the show, but I was really like, what makes a man do that? What makes that, where's that influence come from? And during World War II, there were 17-year-olds and some 16-year-olds who had lied to get in to be a part of World War II. In fact, one of the funny stories is Winston Churchill actually tried to get on a ship for the invasion as the prime minister, and he was told by Eisenhower, well, no. And he said, well, do you control, you control everything, but what about the individual ships? And he's like, well, then whoever that ship belongs to controls it. He goes, okay, then I'm getting on one of them ships. And the only way was to appeal to him that the country needed him as prime minister, could not afford to have him lost. But yeah, Winston Churchill actually everybody wanted to be a part of that invasion, believe it or not. Because they knew what significance it was. And then here we are 75 years later, and we're still celebrating it. There's still a few veterans around who are there. There was a 97-year-old man who actually jumped into the beach to recreate the jump he did at 22 years old. So, yeah, wow. Amazing.
Yeah, I watched it. I saw the video. I got to see that with him jumping back in. I mean, they did the whole everything from the pre-brief to right before he jumped in the plane, then the videotape of the jump, and then the landing. And I would just say this: he landed about. I would say he came in pretty hot. So. His face went right across the ground. But the crazy thing is he got up and it was like it almost looked like he was a kid again in his face and all. To me,
I'm sure that he was also thankful that he wasn't being shot at this time.
oh, absolutely, yeah. It's a much different scene, you know.
Yeah,
it's funny you brought up the idea of the 16, 17-year-old people that when I was recruiting in Ohio, they did at a school a little assembly type thing where they actually invited some. They had a World War II vet, they had a Vietnam vet, they had a Korean War vet, and then they had me because I was a newer Army, and we were like a panel, and the students got to ask us all these questions. I was mesmerized by the World War II vet. I just sat there like a little kid listening to a story, and I'm telling you, this guy came to tears. He said he was one of those 16-year-old kids who signed up illegally, and he even said, he's like, after I got there, I was away for, because it wasn't like he was away for 1 year. He was away for a few years, right? And he cried during that assembly and talked about how the one thing he wanted to see, he wanted to make sure he got back home for, was to see his mother's face. And it was just, and I'm telling you, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. And it just, so when you said the 16, 17-year-olds and all that stuff, it made me remember that particular gentleman. And he had a profound effect upon me. So I couldn't imagine what it was like for you to get to experience something that's so near and dear to your heart,
Yeah, it was. And my wife and I kept saying, like, I mean, I look at both sides of the coin too. So I'm up there on those bunkers that the Germans had, and I'm thinking, like, Erwin Rommel very much probably walked right in these steps. Like, and despite him being on the wrong side of the coin for that, he was still a great strategic military mind. And, it was like, wow, this dude really probably walked right here. And then, like, my wife, the bunkers, she had a hard time with them because she realized that it's a good chance, because you look at some of these bunkers you can go in and you're like, yeah, nobody survived this. And she said she could actually kind of feel that kind of presence, like, of the Nazi soldiers, the Wehrmacht soldiers that had fought there. So, and same thing on the beach. It's like, you can almost just feel it, and then they have landing craft that lead into the beach on one of the beaches. And it's like, wow, just incredible.
Amazing. Yeah. Wow. That's something else, man. And I started off by asking you the question, how did you look upon this and how did it make you feel after knowing all this stuff? What I wanted to relate that to, in a sense, is today's topic, because you said to us, you've studied it and you understood it, but you never really truly knew until you've seen it. Right. And that's kind of like, where we're going with today's show, because really today's show is about self, and we have to talk about self. The topic today is influence starts with self-concept, and self-awareness of this is what psychologists, they refer to as self-concept, is a great starting point. If you're trying to learn how to become an influencer and whatnot, this is a great point for you to begin, because sometimes it's like, well, I want to be an influencer, but where do I begin? Well, start with self. Self always works first. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I definitely, you can't understand anything if you don't understand who you are and what makes you who you are first. And then that allows you to understand more external stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're going to jump right into this right off the bat. Well, what is self-concept? And from what the research we've done, this is what we found. The term self-concept is used in psychology as a means of identifying the thoughts and beliefs that a person has about themselves and how they perceive themselves. Self-concept encompasses what a person believes their attributes are, who and what they are. It is like a mental picture of who you think you are as a person. Have you ever sat there and thought about that? Like, try to build a mental picture of who and what you are?
I have, as a leader, because I actually tell my wife sometimes I'm a much better leader now than I was before, like as a soldier or whatever. I kind of can look at it and kind of look at who I am, but I also use that as a means to say, okay, well, I like to improve in this area or that area. So it's kind of a self-reflection kind of thing to figure out who I am
Hmm.
and where I want to get to.
Right. What you had to say, that's actually pretty much kind of like the lines I'm on. There's a AFN, we have those commercials. They're all dealing military type stuff, right? So AFN, they have this one commercial, and it's a Navy general, and he's standing in front of a tombstone, and he says, "This soldier was born on such and such date, and they passed away on this date." He said, "But what I'm most interested in is this little dash right here. This little dash represents their life." I think about that piece, and I think to myself, my self concept of who I am and my mental picture of me, it's in that dash. And it's like, how do you fill in that little dash with who I am throughout the years? Because I'm not the same person, for instance, as I was as, let's say, a 16-year-old kid versus now as a 40-year-old man. It's insane. And one of the things I've told different soldiers before, it's like, I know it sounds morbid, but what do you want your tombstone to say one day? And I'd have soldiers look at me and be like, what do you mean? And I mean, basically this, what type of person were you? What needs to say on your tombstone to kind of reflect who you were? Well, be that person. Or what are the things you would like to people to be able to say about you at your funeral? Because that's pretty much, that's like the end, as so to speak, as people would think. But those are the types of things. Like, to me, it's like, all right, well, I don't want people to think of me in a negative light. I like this, I like that. I don't want this, So in a sense, take that and reverse that self-concept. And that's where I kind of go with that. What do you have to say, brother?
Yeah, I kind of along the same lines. First of all, if you said to me, what do you want on your tombstone? I'm going to probably tell you pineapple, which does belong on pizza and ham, but you've seen the commercial, right? But seriously,
what do you say? Wait. Hey, self-concept here, because part of it is we're going to talk about self-esteem, self-image, and ideal self. You just said pineapple belongs on pizza, yes?
Absolutely, it does.
Because my mom used to get that when I was young.
If olives belong on there, pineapple belongs on there. That's just the way it is. But so kind of on the same lines, like, what do you want it to say? That dash, though, I've never heard that, and it's very strong. And what I look at is, I always talk about legacy is my thing. Like, what's my legacy? What was my legacy in high school? Well, that wasn't very good. So what was my legacy when I leave the military? Like, what am I leaving behind to make something better or leave an impression? And my idea with self-concept is, I want to know what it is I would like my children to have as their memory when I'm gone. So that's kind of my idea of self-concept. When we talk about like what you want on your tombstone, what do I want my kids to have? What memory?
And what we refer to here is, we're obviously, this is what we're projecting to achieve, that how others see us, and that's, to me, it falls back on self-concept. All right. So my self-concept helps me engineer the life I want to live. Social psychologist Roy Baumeister says that self-concept should be understood as a knowledge structure. People pay attention to themselves, noticing both their internal states and responses and their external behaviors. Through such self-awareness, people collect information about themselves. Self-concept is built from this information and continues to develop as people expand their ideas about who they are. Noticing your internal states and responses and external behaviors. I think we pretty much kind of hit upon that a little bit when we talked about reflecting also, right? How we were able to reflect upon our actions. I'm telling you, to me, it's, if you understand why you react a certain way, you'll be able to, change some of those behaviors so you don't do it in a negative light. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And we talked about that too. So basically, if you get that kind of reflection and you understand those triggers, you can maybe improve on them. Maybe you understand, okay, for me, I try to be a little bit less argumentative because I know that my temper boils easier. So if I'm argumentative, I know it's going to escalate very quickly. So I try to remain calm and be aware of that so that I have a little bit better control over a situation. So that's kind of what goes along with those lines. Yeah, it's just
absolutely.
self-awareness, reflection. I mean, man, I feel like these are some themes. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Self-awareness, people collect information about themselves. So do you ever find yourself collecting information about Ed?
Ooh, that's I mean, yeah, I mean, I kind of pay attention to how I react to certain situations or things, especially at home.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really big on trying to pay attention because there's some things that I know that are flawed that I'd like to improve on with my spouse. And, so I pay attention and I'm like, oh man, I handled that the wrong way. And I need to remember that so that going forward, I handle that particular situation, better. Like, for instance, she would come home sometimes I think I've talked about it before. My spouse, sometimes she just wants to vent. And it's not that she's complaining, but I would treat it like she was complaining. And, that's not what she was after. All she was after was an ear for her to vent to. And maybe she was complaining, but all she wanted was an ear. So I was like, okay, just, so she'll do this and I'll say, okay, just listen. She's not looking for you to solve the world's problems. She's just looking for you to listen to her. So that's one of those instances of me paying attention to me and taking note.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about it, though, we were teaching that too during our communications class. Sometimes you just have to sit there and listen to what the soldier has to say. They don't need you to fix their problem. They have a solution. They just have to talk about it. That's a really,
or to make them the solution while they're talking.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's, I mean, but that right there, to me, that's that's that whole being aware of who yourself and collecting that information to build the better you. And one of the things I've noticed, because I do the same thing, like I'll pick up on a conversation and I'll be like, wait a second, I've been in this situation before. I'm not going to say the same thing I did before, or I'm not going to react that way. I'm going to react more. One of the key ones that I've found myself doing more is when somebody tells me something bad or something that would normally trigger me being mad, I literally tell myself, yeah, it's okay. No one's shooting at you. Wait, somebody told us that once, right?
Yeah, I feel like a ninja.
The bearded ninja. But that's the mindset I'm trying to go with. I hadn't talked to him in a little while, so I'll probably end up sending him a message here soon. But it wasn't too long ago. We were talking about something, and we were talking about isms. You know what isms are like, right, Ed?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like certain places.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Certain places we act a certain way because it's become the norm.
That's how we've always done it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a roadblock, right? A roadblock of change. And we were talking about those isms, and he said to me, literally, he's like, and that's the type of stuff that we're trying to weed out of the service to make it more conducive and a better environment that people want to be more active critical thinkers and all that. They'll want to offer their information or their understanding versus, when you have those people who are very demanding. They rule through fear in a sense, or they try to lead through fear, which I can't consider it leading. People tend to not want to give up information. They just want to get it, whatever they have to get done, and then be out of the presence of that person. Sometimes, to me, I wish sometimes people who acted like that had a little bit more self-concept, much like what we're talking about. So
yeah, that well, I mean, I've actually attempted rule through fear. So rule through fear, that's medieval. That's old school Genghis Khan type stuff. If you don't do what I'm tell you, then I'm just gonna murder you. That doesn't work. This is a modern age, and it's an ineffective way to rule. So, or rule or lead or what have you. Yeah. So that's not gonna work. But yeah. A bearded ninja, he's full of wise guidance.
Yeah. No, and that's why I always enjoy hearing what he has to say. I'm going to have to talk to him soon. All right, so I'm going to continue on this small little area where it talks about what is self-concept. A person's self-concept helps them define who they think they are and how they fit into this world. That in itself makes self-concept important because every individual wants to know themselves and feel as though they belong. Now, I read some things not too long ago, Ed, and it was talking about that whole wanting to belong thing, right? Organizations, the more they help their employees or those who work in and around them, the more they help them understand what it is they're trying to do to make, say, the world a better place. That is normally when those individuals, they want to be there and work harder for them. So to me, you could even take that idea of self-concept all the way up through, you could take it through all the different levels throughout an organization. And if people used it more, they could be more introspective, about things. But every individual wants to know themselves. I mean, I have a hard time understanding why somebody wouldn't want to know themselves, but I mean, there's probably a valid answer. I just don't know, and then how you fit into the world. That's pretty critical, I would say.
Yeah. So to me, this can be you as the supervisor too. I want to understand who I am, like what role I fit into in this organization. Sounds a lot like talent management to me. So I know who I am. And, I don't know if we've ever talked about the elevator pitch, basically, selling yourself. So, at our level, when we get to an organization, especially for you, because you can go two different routes, right? Like you can go be a first sergeant or you can be a master sergeant. So that's where this self-concept, this understanding yourself allows you to sell yourself to get the first sergeant position. Well, here's who I am, and here's how I think I fit into your organization.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing in the business world too, right? Like you get there, and when you're interviewing, that's your opportunity to tell them, this is who I am, and this is how I think I can help your organization. That's why self-concept seems to be very important.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is we're going to jump into the different parts, what has been defined by Carl Rogers. He's a humanist, a psychologist, but Carl Rogers actually has three different segments or three different parts to what makes self-concept. And I think what you're talking about actually falls into the second one of self-image.
Okay.
And possibly ideal self. So we're going to jump right into those. There are basically three parts to self-concept. There's self-esteem, self-image, and then ideal self. So self-esteem. What are your thoughts about self-esteem right off the bat, Ed?
This is something that you see a lot of younger people. Sometimes they struggle with it. This can lead to some dark places when you lack self-esteem.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes you can see it in how people respond to situations. You can see that they lack that. So this is one, not only to understand for yourself, but for Brian's subordinates, you need to be able to recognize people who have issues with self-esteem, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we can think about this. It was way back, episode 4. We had the suicide talk, right?
Oh yeah,
a lot of people they trigger that particular thing. It falls back on things like depression, low self-esteem, things like that. So self-esteem is key to the self-concept because the higher it is, the more somebody has, they have a more positive or elevated self-concept of themselves, and the better things are, right? And it's kind of how you view yourself. So self-esteem is the value we place upon ourselves. Individual levels of self-esteem are dependent on the way we evaluate ourselves. Those evaluations incorporate our personal comparisons to others as well as others' responses to us. I could tell you this, Ed. My self-esteem when I was younger, horrible. And tell you the truth, my self-esteem never really elevated until I was about, I would say, 23, 4, somewhere in there. Like 23, 24, my self-esteem started to elevate more. And the funny thing is it was me being placed in leadership positions and allowing me to be more like the voice of those or the one who's leading those. You've talked about basketball and playing basketball and loving it, all that. When I was in high school, I'm going to Al Bundy it one more time. I used to love football. I wasn't the greatest on the field. I can tell you that right now, but I enjoyed it. And it was something about that sport that helped start elevating that self-esteem, that leadership trait that influencer trait, right? It it was almost like every time I did something good, it was like a little golden ticket or something that I get to hang on to and I get to look back upon and enjoy. And I want to say there's a book, it's called Can't Hurt Me by Goggins. I can't remember his first name. And he actually he refers to it as like little cookies that you put in a cookie jar. So every time something really good happens and you're proud of it, it's like a little cookie, and you just put it in a cookie jar, and you just keep filling up this cookie jar. And then when you have those days that are not so good, or those days that you feel like somebody's really coming down on you, you can actually reach in the cookie jar, pull out that cookie, and kind of reflect upon that situation, and it help you get through. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh no, because I mean, you feel better when you realize that you're good at something. You know what I mean? Like, so you talk about my love of basketball, but if you make a play and people start like patting you and going, wow, like, then your self-esteem gets elevated. But I think what we got to be cautious of too, though, is if our self-esteem gets too elevated, we have to make sure that we can check our ego too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why my wife doesn't like to watch me play basketball, because when I would play and I would be doing really well and people are, boosting up my self-esteem, my ego was also growing, and it was growing quicker than my self-esteem could handle. And I was being a little excessive. So, and the author of the book you're speaking about is David Goggins, former
David. Okay.
Yeah. Former Navy SEAL, Ranger, just real B.A. Baracus of modern times.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's impressive. And to tell you the truth, now I remember I actually was speaking to, he's a counselor for like an alcohol rehab type place. We were talking and we got into this discussion about self-esteem. And he actually was telling me about the whole, and it wasn't a counselor for me or anything. What I was getting at was he was talking about how self-esteem it's an amazing thing. And then he talked about the Goggins thing, David Goggins thing, book with me. And then he was talking about, but we have to be careful. Just like you said, our self-esteem can't get too high, because if it is too high, you want to keep it in the middle, please, because too high can create a euphoria, so to speak. So in what he was referring to, because what he was talking to me about was like at this treatment facility where he helps people through their addiction. What it is he says, when you're feeling really low and you want to drink, you also get that same feeling when you're really, up in the higher area of having high self-esteem. It's the same feeling at the top and the bottom. It's exact same. The only problem is the much higher one, you don't realize that's what you're wanting. And he was explaining to me that with self-esteem, you got to kind of stay in the middle, and you got to kind of float in the middle a little bit. And so, it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But it was a fascinating conversation. He gave me a bunch of things to kind of look at when it comes to a lot of stuff like this. And I was like, oh, that's really cool.
That's awesome.
So, but with that, yeah, it was really, I mean, he was very knowledgeable on the whole human psychology thing. The deal is he even told me, he's like, yeah, I always wanted, he's a civilian now. He served 4 years, and it was this, and it kills me. So I think this is a part of the self-concept older generations I haven't seen, they don't grasp onto, where they'll say, oh, I served, but not like you. And I'm like, no, you did serve like me. The only thing different was I had to go to a war or something because it just happened. But I had to prepare just like them beforehand. You know what I mean? Like, so it's kind of, I don't know. That's like one of those things that's always bothered me. But he's like, yeah, I served, but no, not quite like you. Only did 4 years, and then I get out, and then I became this. He became like a drug and alcohol addiction counselor, and he was telling me all this.
Oh, he's still serving,
and it's what he said. He said, I wanted to continue to give back to the service by helping service members. So it's pretty fascinating. I'm gonna see. Maybe I can highlight the actually program he works for it sometime on the show down the road. I felt everything he talked about was just amazing. I loved it. I loved what he was telling us. As me and my commander, we had to go see him about a situation, but the conversation, I learned so much, and a lot of it had to do with self-esteem, man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. When we compare ourselves to others and find that we are better at some things than others, and or that people respond favorably to what we do, our self-esteem in that area grows. On the other hand, when we compare ourselves to others and find we're not as successful in a given area, or people respond negatively to what we do, our self-esteem decreases. We can have high self-esteem in some areas. I am a good student, while simultaneously having negative self-esteem in others. I'm not well liked. What do you have areas, Ed, that you have found you've had lower self-esteem before?
This is recent because the job that I came to, like I had never been exposed to some of the logistics that we do here at this organization. And originally, like I would go to meetings and I would just clam up because my self-esteem was pretty low on my knowledge. But I do find that as I've grown and learned and continued to learn more about what we do and about the logistics, then I'll speak up. And so when they're doing, when we have a set of problems we're trying to figure out, previously I'd have just sat there and let somebody else figure it out. I went groupthink, right? Mm-hmm. Now, though, I have a little more input and I'm like, well, what about this? And then if it's crazy, it's another opportunity to learn, because I'll say something, they'll be like, well, that wouldn't work because of this law or these rules. And I'll be like, oh, okay, now that makes sense. So yeah, no, this is something that I think we go through periods of your life. I think you have the low self-esteem. It's getting yourself out of that though. And how do I get out? Well, I need to learn more. That's what I need to do. And then you get better at it. So yeah, this is something recent that I've had.
How self-esteem is adjusted to. Like, for instance, when you make a comment like that, like you say, well, have we tried this? And they say, no, that wouldn't work. Normally, how do you feel right after your self-esteem, right after they say it wouldn't work, but before they tell you why?
I feel less knowledgeable. I feel like I'm the least intelligent in the room on that particular area.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I was thinking about that, because the same way, where I've worked in aviation, Army aviation all my career, but they're using some jargon here and there. And I'm like, and I'm not joking. I'm writing small, and it's basically acronyms. I'm writing these down. Like, I have no idea what they're talking about. Like, and it makes me mad because internally I feel like, well, I should know this maybe. I don't know. And so it lowers my self-esteem a little bit. But at the same time, what I do is I pay attention enough to catch on to context clues of what they're saying. And then I'm like, oh, I know what they mean.
Yeah. So I write, I did the same thing, buddy. I wrote the acronyms down and I go to the Google machine and try to figure it out that way, because they use so many when you're doing any kind of logistical planning. Like you're talking about SPOs, SPODs, APODs, APOs. And I'm like, who? LSA, CSA, and I'm writing them down and then I go back. And then I have one captain that I work with that if I absolutely can't find it through research, then I'll go and say, hey, sir, I tried to find this. I cannot nail down exactly what this is. Mm-hmm. And then he'll tell me, oh, that's the acronym for this. And then I'll go back and say, okay, now what does that do? Or what does that mean? And try to figure that out, because I learned better. For me, I learned better that way than him saying, oh, that acronym stands for this and that's this.
Yeah.
I might not retain that as well as if I go Google machine it once he tells me what the acronym stood for. So, no, I'm with you. It's funny you said that. So I'm going through the same thing.
Absolutely. And, so if you look at it, right, what we were doing, and we were making adjustments because we're trying to use the experience we've had before. We're making adjustments to our self-esteem. We're gathering that information. We're processing it at our level, right? So I may not be completely aware of everything there. So I have to go back and I have to say, okay, well, I understand X, Y, and Z. I don't understand these things. So how do I correlate them? And we process it. And then it helps build our self-esteem because one, become more knowledgeable, and we understand the situation. And then when somebody talks to us or asks us a question about it, we're able to give feedback or answers, which helps increase that self-esteem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it completely makes sense. Just because, like I said, right now you and I have a shared experience that it sounds like.
I love shared experiences. We just bonded.
Oh, man. For life.
For life. Yeah, so self-esteem, huge part of self-concept, y'all. When you think about it, in some people I even talked about it with my wife, where we talked about you don't focus on other people's shortcomings. And if you focus on your partner's shortcomings, and you basically you lower their self-esteem. In the same time, my self-image, I can't focus on my shortcomings so much that it detracts from the positive image I could create by becoming more knowledgeable and have a better understanding and whatnot. So we really got to think about self-esteem as a big part of self-concept. Your self-esteem, if you want to connect it to influence, how you project yourself, right? Because we're going to talk about self-image and idea of self also, but how you project your self-esteem can actually influence others people around you. I know it can. Obviously, you can't be overconfident, but if you're confident in something, you'd be surprised how somebody will say a little comment to you like, "Wow, I didn't realize you really understood it that well," or "Wow, I can't believe that you were so knowledgeable in such an area. That was terrific." I mean, I know Ed's heard it before. He used to teach a class full of people to help build their self-esteem when it came to giving a class.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true. And it was a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, it is. But it's funny. But wasn't it funny, though, like when you watched people come into that classroom as unknowledgeable on one thing and you help build them up to become, and you watch the first time they give a class to the last time they give a class or whatever, and you see a growth in their own self-esteem.
Oh, yeah. And the greatest ones were the ones that were going to work at the academy with us, because I can see them 6 months down the road as compared to, day zero.
Mm-hmm.
So those were the best ones to see, because you could really see that growth, and you could see their self-esteem increase over time.
And when we see other people's self-esteem grow because of something we may have done, that helps in turn grow our self-esteem. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it raises my confidence as an instructor because you got it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the bad thing is, though, that we beat ourselves up, because at the same time, you may have somebody that just does not advance, and maybe they're just resistant, and so they don't do as well. And then we also take that personally, and that can hurt our self-esteem a little bit. We take that hit, that failure, that one that, hey, we got to kick him out of the academy because he just cannot teach, who was one of my early students. He just cannot instruct the way we want him to. Those guys hurt your self-esteem a little bit. It makes you take a step back.
Yeah, because you start reevaluating who who you are and how you're going about things. So I totally understand. Heck yeah, man. All right, we're going to move on to self-image, which is the second part of self-concept. Self-image is the way we see ourselves. Self-image includes what we know about ourselves physically, i.e. our brown hair, blue eyes, whether you have a tail or not. Our social roles also, whether we're a wife or a brother, if I'm a gardener, I'm a soldier, whatever, and our personality traits, outgoing, serious, kind. So if you think about it, self-image is more, it's the physical traits. It's not the mental traits we talk about in self-esteem. I see myself as tall, dashing, and rather confident in my behavior or how I act.
Well, you're one of those.
But when you think about it, though, it's like, how do you know? One of the things is haircuts, right? My self-image. I like to have my hair cut a certain way every time. I always pick the same type of barber. When I was in high school, I had the same barber throughout the years. Matter of fact, you and we had the same barber back in Clarksville. When I got here, I literally watched the different barbers in the barber shop and watched how, one, they interacted, and two, how well they trimmed other people's hair. And I basically selected the one who would help do what he needed to make my hair look good for my own self-image, right? I'm not going to walk in as somebody that jack it all up, because then you become a little bit self-conscious, right? I mean, have you ever felt that way, Ed?
Yeah. When I got here to Germany, I had some rough haircuts before I finally found a barber.
Yeah. And was it tough though?
Yeah, it was, because at one point I was actually like, you know what? I'm gonna start shaving my head again. I've had enough of this nonsense.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was rough at first. Now I got one, And actually, I gotta go see her here in a little bit because I really need a haircut. I got one now, and I get really upset when I go there and she's not there. I know she's off certain days, but if she's not there on a day she's supposed to be there, I'm like, oh no, someone else gonna have to cut my hair. No, especially like a day like today when I absolutely have to have one.
Oh man, I hope she's there.
She better be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's funny though, because that's, in a sense, like you're literally going through this whole little thing in your mind, like I hope she's there and all this stuff, because it all reflects upon your self-image.
Oh yeah, like, and then with the military, your haircut is important. I can't tell a soldier, hey, you need a haircut, and I don't have a haircut either. So then it's so much more to it, dude. But you feel really. I remember coming out there, man, after Heather cut my hair and styled it, because at the military barber they really don't style it; they just cut it and like you gotta go home and style it. But Heather would style it, and man, you just walk with a different sense of confidence. Because you had that fresh looking hair.
You want to go show it off.
Yeah, and you always get it for something significant. Like the wife and I are going to a Taylor Swift concert. Gotta get a haircut today. Like you just want that extra boost to your image and your confidence. So yeah, I agree. A fresh, nice haircut, it's a booster.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's all part of that self-image thing, right? That's how you see yourself physically. At the same time, you're a husband, you're a father, you're a soldier. How you see yourself in those roles, also those social roles. I'm the same thing as you, and it's funny. Like when I see myself as a husband, I want to be that loving, caring, supportive individual. When I see myself as a father, I want to be loving, caring, have discipline for my children, but in a manner that they'll learn and they're not going to resent me. As a soldier, it's like a mixture of both of those things: loving, caring, support them, but also have discipline for them, but not in a manner where they'll resent me. You see what I'm saying? It's very much all the same.
Yeah.
But it's still a social role. What do you got?
Your social role plays a big deal. And that, again, I can see how it fits right into your self-image, because I went through a divorce, and when you go through that, you really feel like, well, was I a bad husband? Like it could hurt your own image of yourself. Maybe I'm not a good person to live with somebody else, or whatever it is. So it could do some damage there, and that could damage your self-image, could damage your self-esteem. And then here we go, like the rock rolling down the hill, gathering moss or whatever. Snowball effect. That's it. Snowball effect. But I knew I was trying to say something there.
Yeah.
But yeah, how you see yourself is important. But let's be accurate too. Like, see yourself, be legit. Like if Brian, if you saw yourself as, well, I'm pretty much Thor, and that's probably not accurate. Like, you don't have long flowing golden hair, but everything else, all right. But other than that,
yeah. But I mean, and that's the whole point, though. It's like you have to see yourself in that positive image too, though. Really, I mean, because if you can visualize, we talked about creating a vision back a few episodes back. But if you can visualize that self-image, you should be able to fulfill it too. I mean, yeah, I can't be Thor, right? But can I be a superhero to my kids? Absolutely, I can.
Yeah.
Can they look up to me like I'm something really great and important? So you can almost relate it, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and then so from the research we did, it talks about sometimes your self-image isn't matching reality, and some individuals hold an inflated perception of one or more of their characteristics. So sometimes people try to impress you by using $10 words, right, with a GED vocabulary. You pick up on it. Like, you can pick up on people who are trying to be something they're not, like whatever personality trait. Usually the person who thinks they're funny, but they're really not funny, that person's usually annoying, and you pick up on it pretty quickly.
Yep.
So they may think, hey, I'm hilarious. Like I'm the next Kevin Hart, or yeah, no, you're definitely, you're not at all. So those things could have a negative impact, having an inflated perception of your characteristics and your self-image.
Absolutely. And the thing is those inflated perceptions, they could be positive or negative, and the individual may have a more positive view of certain aspects of the self and a more negative view of others. You kind of got to be careful with that. You have to, you don't, because you don't want to hold yourself to such a high self-image that all of a sudden now your ego is building off that, and you are better than them, or you look better than them, or you know what I mean? Like those are the things you have to be careful of, because you could fall into that pit, and that's kind of like a never-ending pit in a sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like basically you're sitting on a throne of lies trying to look down on somebody,
Yeah,
and it's really your own self-image, being unrealistic.
I like that comment. Throne of lies. Ooh, that could be a good
Yeah.
show. No.
You,
All
you
right,
don't
so
even want to know where I got it from.
oh wow. So we discussed self-esteem and we talked about self-image. Now we're going to go into the third part that Dr. Rogers, that kind of feels weird because the Rogers we know, he's not a doctor, but he might as well be. Ideal self. This is what a couple different authors that we looked up mentioned. The ideal self is the self we would like to be. There's often a difference between one's self-image and one's ideal self. This incongruity can negatively impact one's self-esteem. So see how that what we're saying is so I have my self-image that I can see, and then I have my ideal self. And if those two don't like equal out almost, or they're not closer to reality of each other, then it knocks my self-esteem. So it's kind of like a Trinity thing there. You know what I'm saying?
That makes sense to me too. So yeah, sometimes your self-image and your ideal self, they may or may not match up together. So, and that could be an issue, with identifying your ideal self.
Yeah. So while it is difficult, if not impossible, to achieve perfect congruence, greater congruence will enable self-actualization. Incongruence between the self-image and ideal self means there's a discrepancy between oneself and one's experiences, leading to internal confusion that prevents self-actualization. So there's a Dr. Bruce Bracken developed his own multidimensional self-concept scale that includes 6 primary groups of traits that help to define self-concept. And, and this is kind of like an area where you can actually kind of look at things. Let's talk about the physical first, right? How we look physically, healthy, physical fitness level. I am ugly, I am strong, or I am, I am good looking. The physical traits. So let me ask you this. When you're at the gym, Ed, right?
Yeah.
And you've been, lifting and you're really getting after it and stuff. Are you pleased with what you see in the mirror, or are you like, oh man, I wish I could just be bigger?
So I base my pleasure for the gym on how sweaty is my shirt.
Well, that's a physical image if you think about it. Yeah.
So I will look, and if it is like just sweaty around the neck, I'm like, oh, I did not get after it today, and it's a big letdown for me. So
Yeah.
yes, that, and then on arm day, ever since my daughter and my sister decided that my daughter got her noodle arms from me, then on arm day, I do kind of look a little more at size and stuff like that, and maybe get disappointed or think, man, I need to work this even harder next time.
Let me give you a little boost of self-esteem here, buddy. I've seen you in the gym after you lifted. You don't have noodle arms.
It was because my daughter didn't do well in a competition because of her arms, and now they traced it back to me.
Oh, whatever. That's messed up, man.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. So
wow.
Apparently noodle arms is hereditary.
Wow. Yeah. Or, and if you think about it too, right? We think not only the our physical health, but also maybe like, and how we physically looked, for instance, some people are self-conscious about their teeth, right? So they don't smile a certain way. I know people like that,
Yes. Yeah. I've seen that. I had a soldier and she had a gap in her front teeth, and every time she laughed, she would put her hand over her mouth. And I actually told that soldier one time, I said, do you know that draws more attention than if you just laugh?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
And she's like, do you really think so?
Yeah.
I said, yes, because every time something's funny, you put your hand to your mouth, that's a distraction. People notice that movement.
Yeah.
I said, you should try it and you'll notice. People won't even notice it.
Yeah.
Now she's had braces and it's gone, but yeah.
Well, Michael Strahan, I saw him. I happened to catch a show because he does all kinds of shows on TV now. But he started joking about himself and the gap between his teeth. But he even said, he's like, oh, I'm not getting this changed. This is part of my image. And I'm like, you know what? That's good. To take something that could have been a weakness and turn it into a strength that's your self-image and you're proud of it. That's good. You know, I have crooked pinkies.
David Letterman.
Oh yeah. He's another one.
Yep. Yeah. David Letterman did the gap tooth for years. I want to say he maybe had a logo for his show or something that had it in there. Like,
yeah,
sometimes people just embrace those things. And
yeah. I'm self-conscious. Was always self-conscious about my pinkies because they're crooked. They're just, one of the bones didn't grow, the one in the middle, so they kind of curve in, and it always bothered me for years, even when I was young. So, like, if you'd ever see me, I'd kind of curl my pinkies in, and that way people wouldn't notice it. But I found that like you said, with the young lady and covering her mouth, people notice it more when you're doing something that's out of the normal.
Yeah.
So let's talk with social. How we interact with others, both giving and receiving. That's another area of self-concept. Interacting with others, giving and receiving. It doesn't have to be giving a gift, but just maybe giving a smile, whatever it is.
Yeah. So this is one that I've worked on now for about a year and a half. I've been trying to get better at. So quick story. So when we were at Normandy, we stopped at this restaurant and we were eating, and the lady at the table next to us had an English accent, right? So we're in France, and she makes a comment about her accents to the French waitress who doesn't speak a whole lot of English. And so I snickered about it because she said something like, my French is terrible. My English isn't much better. And so I laughed, and the table across from her laughed, right?
Yeah.
Well, she turns to me and she goes, and I hadn't spoke, so she doesn't know. So she goes, are you laughing at me? I said, I absolutely am, with my English, my American accent, right? And she just laughed at that. Well, then she starts talking to my wife, and she starts talking to me. And then she had got a book at one of the museums she went to that she bought, and she give it to us. So that's social, how we interact with others, that little gesture, just thinking that what she said was funny, led to an interaction. And then we end up walking out to the parking lot, talking to them. And
that's cool.
I told my wife, I said, hey, this be a more social thing. This is pretty cool.
It is, man. I'm telling you, if you just try to interact with people more, it's funny how you literally can see them light up. So being more social kind of helps out. And there's a book referring, because there are people that say, well, I'm an introvert. Well, that's fine. There's actually this really good book. It's called Quiet: The Power of an Introvert. And there are concepts in there that can help people who feel as if they're introverted to become more social and more active with others. And frankly, I recommend anyone to get that and to check it out.
Same thing. Like when we were at the beach, we were in one of the bunkers, and we started having a conversation with these two kids and their mom. They took a picture of us in the bunker, and we took a picture of them. And just a random conversation. That kid was smarter. He was probably about 12, 13, smarter on military history than me, man. It was an awesome conversation, but just random in this German World War II era bunker, just being social. And you just, I can tell you, I get a dopamine rush from it. I get a boost from it.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. Well, it's because we were, if you think about it, we were genetically built to be social creatures. We're not built to stay to ourselves. When you put somebody in solitary confinement, they usually go crazy or they become truly depressed and everything. So there becomes a chemical imbalance. We're supposed to be social creatures. Good point, man. Great point to add to that.
Yeah, it's different. So I got to correct the story. I'm going to try to correct the story. So what happened was the lady didn't get her garlic bread. And then when she said something to the waitress, I laughed. And then she turned around and said something to my wife, and my wife goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And she goes, "You don't have to apologize." My wife says, "I'm Canadian. I do have to apologize." And then we all laughed, and it kind of turned into this thing. So my wife can hear us recording, and I got the message but it was funny. My wife was very quick with it too. Like, "I'm sorry." "Oh, you don't have to apologize." "No, I'm Canadian. I have to." So just to clarify, but it created a social thing. It was really cool. Here we are in France.
Yeah.
3 tables of us. None of us speak French, really. It was funny.
You all were in the same predicament.
Yeah, and it's rough. I'm gonna tell you, in that part of France, there's not a lot of English speaking, except right on the stores on the beaches. But once you leave that general area, it gets a little harder to find somebody who speaks a lot of English. They'll speak it a little, but petite.
Brother, let me tell you, it's just as bad here. I don't even like interacting with the toll booth lady. Like, if you drive out the highway and you go to the toll booth and she's like telling you, it almost feels like she's screaming at you to tell you to give you the money, And I'm like, I'm trying to count it. So yeah, I totally.
I'm so confused.
Yeah, that's how I feel. But I just told the guys too, because we went to a baseball game the other night, last night actually, up in Suwon, and we went to watch a baseball game. And I told the guys, I said, "Man, I wish I knew more Korean. I wish I could just understand like half of what they're saying, and how to say hello and goodbye." That's it. All right, the next,
and you've been there before.
Yeah, that's like 18 years ago, man. So,
all right, I'll give you that.
All right, so the next the group of the other trait that we got in here is family. How we relate to family members, how we interact with family members. I think that is key. I really believe that helps out with the whole self-concept, with especially with self-esteem, I feel like, and the image, definitely. Am I a good enough father? That's one of those big ones to me. Like, I literally will sit there, and I don't know if you've done it before yourself, Ed. I will sit there and debate in my head about certain things, interactions I've had with my kids, worried if I've messed them up for life, and it could be something small and stupid, but I still worry about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And, and then doing what we do for a living too. So I always question that, like, being military, am I being a good father to the kids, or a husband to the wife? Because it's so taxing what we do. It's so demanding of our time, and we're gone so much. So that is one of the things I think I often reflect on for the ideal self, is the family part. And then my siblings too. Like, am I, because I'm the oldest, right? Like, and my father he's still alive, but with my siblings, I look at, am I the best big brother, older brother that I can be? My sister would prefer older brother, not big brother. Am I the best one that I can possibly be to them? Like, am I the example for them? Have I always tried to be that? Those are the type of things. Yeah, those are very important to you.
I'm just going to go on a record here. I've seen the picture of the three of you standing together. You are the biggest. I'm just going to put it out there. Okay. And I'm not talking about like
Thank
heavy.
you.
I'm talking about tall wise. Like, you're super tall, the rest of them. It's just one of those things, man. Like, you just don't want to, like, I don't want to be known as a deadbeat dad. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
Let's move into the next one. Competence. I love this. I've always loved that word. Competence is my watchword. It's a little quote from something. How we manage the basic need
I've heard that.
of our life, employment, self-care. Am I a skilled writer? Am I a skilled soldier? Do I understand the necessary qualities and traits needed to do X, Y, and Z type thing, right? Competence is many things. Competence in, say, cooking. Anyone can put toast in a toaster, click it down, hopefully it won't burn because you didn't adjust it too high.
Right.
But can everybody cook good French toast? What's the competence level of being able to do that? I guess that's a simple way to look at it. But when it comes to work, competence, that's how you know if you're going to stay employed or not, personally. Okay? That's the way I see it.
Yeah, and this is my favorite thing is lifelong learning. And so for competence, I look at that as an opportunity to do some more learning. So, as the older generation, and you're very good at the iPad and all this stuff, but as they keep changing things and then you retire and you move out into the civilian sector, there may be some new technology that Brian and Ed just do not know. We're not familiar with. And that's one of those things that, like, through self-study and learning, you can get more competent in. So for me, it's Microsoft Excel. I hate Microsoft Excel.
Right.
But watching videos, reading Microsoft for Dummies, those can make you much better and more competent in the use of that program.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, to me, that's an opportunity to make yourself better through the lifelong learning. And obviously some things you're just good at, like, but some things you got to work at, even in the sport. So my brother's a great bowler, but he wasn't always a great bowler, right? He had to work at it to get more competent. Now, he's got skills. I hate that I got a bowl against him in November, and he's really, really good.
Absolutely. And, so I pull up the definition real quick, too, so we can read it, and then people can kind of see what it is. The quality or state of having sufficient knowledge, judgment, skill, or strength as for a particular duty or in a particular respect. Really, it's, are you able to do what needs to be done for whatever skill is needed or for whatever decision needs to be made? Because, making decisions, being competent in the area that you have to make a decision upon, that is key, because you could really make a bad decision.
Yes.
And it can affect multiple people, right?
Yes.
I think it falls back on, like, just like you said, man, lifelong learning is one of those, it sounds like a catchphrase for us, but it's not just that. It's actually a way of living for us, right? That's part of being an influencer. So you gain that competence by learning as you go and retaining that information. The people who don't have competence in something normally are those who don't pay attention when something happens. And you and I have seen that, Ed. I don't want to bring up a particular person. Oh man, how do I say it? Because we're so far away and real short.
Yeah, gotcha.
You already know, don't you?
Yeah, I gotcha.
Okay. So Ed and I have dealt with an individual, and this is the way I think. I think the person is smart enough to be able to do stuff, but never paid attention, never once.
No.
And the reason I think, and I'll back up the reason why I think that person is smart enough is because of how quickly they could give answers, like excuses, I guess you could say, but they're well thought up. And I'm like, how did you come up with that? You know what I mean? I think the person was smart enough, just didn't pay attention when they needed to allow them to be competent in the tasks we needed of that person. Does that make sense, Ed?
So I'm going to tie this into a little bow for you. So the problem with that person's competence was they had an inflated self-image.
Ooh.
So when you tried to help them, so for example, I go in the classroom and I say, hey, you need to work on this. I always do that. I just sat in your classroom. You didn't do it. Or, hey, I know you're struggling getting your evaluations scores up. So come see me and I'll help you. No, I'm good. They just don't like me. So their image was so inflated that it affected their competence level. Yeah. I knew I was spot on with the person. So.
And, I hate to say this too, though. It's like sometimes we can actually be the downfall of that, or we can be the one who's overinflating their self-image too. Because if we don't say something, and it's not like in a mean way, like actually talk to, and you have to catch it early on, right? Because obviously you're talking about situations where this person's already been overinflated by others, and now it's like, oh crap, we can't turn this around because this person's obviously gone too far. I think really it's, as an influencer, you have to be honest with those people. You have to be honest with yourself though too at the same time, and how you direct your attention to them. So yeah, man, that was a good way to pull it all together there. The very next one falls in line with competence. It's academic, intelligence, school, ability to learn, things that we could say to ourselves are, am I stupid? Am I smart? I think competence and academic fall together. So, Dr. Bracken, he refers to these as 6 separate areas, but to me, I almost have to say competence and academic kind of fall together. I mean, what do you think, man?
Yeah, they kind of do. I mean, yeah, because the whole thing with academics is, your competence level is going to drive your success. So when you feel like, you just can't learn, or you're terrible at school, like you hear that a lot. Oh, I'm just not good at school. Well, that's going to affect your ability to perform academically in school, because you've already got that negative mindset. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can see how they could bounce together.
Yeah, they very much are. But then again, I also, now I'm looking at it, I kind of see it as how they're separate, because one feeds into the other, if that makes sense. I really believe the academic feeds into the competence more than the competence feeds into academics. But then again, I think understanding certain academics, becoming competent, now feeds back into academics. So it's kind of weird. But I would definitely say that this falls back on lifelong learning, bro. That right there. And it turns into, it's like, all right, so what are you doing to learn something new? Or do you have the ability to learn something new? And where are you getting the information from? Are you doing your own research? Are you allowing somebody else to do it for you and you're just listening to them? I mean, that to me, that's key, because although we can take other people's opinions, we've also got to understand how to search for our own answers. Now, I'm not saying, somebody listening here, right now, is somebody's going to find another black hole in the universe because they figure something out or whatever. What I'm getting at is, well, do you understand black holes? Okay. Well, I mean, I don't understand them, but well, what do you know about them? And then how did you learn more about them? Well, you got to study what other people have researched, and then you test those theories, things like that. So it really, that's kind of where that whole, I think, academics comes into play with a self-image. All right, the next area that we're going to speak about, and it's the last of the 6, is affect. Interpretation and understanding of emotional states. This one, that's probably the most key one, wouldn't you say, Ed?
That one I really think plays into self-awareness too. That's one for me, I can tell you, that's pretty important. Being able to understand. So I understand what frustrates me, and I understand when I'm starting to feel a little bit flustered. Or so right now we're having internet issues here, and I can tell you, man, I hate seeing that stupid spinny on Netflix. And then I'll try something else, and then we'll go back and it's still just on the spinny, or it'll go to 24%. I know that makes me flustered. So for a couple of days last week, I was like, I'm not going to turn the television on. I'm just going to read. I'll let my wife deal with it, because I know it flusters me. And it's just like anybody nowadays with a smartphone. You pick up your smartphone and you got no signal, and you get frustrated. And it's a chemical thing. And if you look, our man Simon Sinek talks about it in Leaders Eat Last. It's a chemical thing. You're flustered because you don't have internet in your phone and you need it right this moment, but you really don't, because you just want to see who liked my pictures. So, yeah, understand your emotional state. We've talked about it before, with emotional intelligence. So.
Yeah, and it's understanding not only those frustration times, but also those angry times, those happy times, those sad times, those times when you're depressed, right? And be able to identify those areas. I think those help with that self, actualization, and help this, you identify the self concept that you want to reach, right? Two perspectives can be combined to zero in on one specific trait that help a person better define their self-concept. So if you take any of those 6, physical, social, family, competence, academic, and affect, you can take 2 of those and you work on 2 together, and it'll help increase or make things better for you in your self-concept. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because we even talked about the 2 perspective thing, earlier. We talked about, with competence and academic, right? Those two can be combined together, and then that helps us have a better understanding of that aspect of our own self-concept.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, even you could take competence and physical, or you can take affect and social. So I mean, there's all different types, or affect. I'm sorry, I said affect. I meant affect. But you take those You combine the two and you use them to help increase that self-concept. All right. Development of self-concept. Self-concept begins to develop in early childhood. Now, the process continues throughout the lifespan. However, it is between early childhood and adolescence that self-concept experiences the most growth. By age 2, children begin to differentiate themselves from others. By the ages of 3 and 4, children understand they are separate and unique selves. At this stage, a child's self-image is largely descriptive, based mostly on physical characteristics or concrete details. Yet children increasingly pay attention to their capabilities, and by about 6 years old, children can communicate what they want and need. They are also starting to define themselves in terms of social groups. Man, I watch that with my kids now, man, or especially my youngest one. I can see her starting to define who she is, and she's definitely an artist. She's gonna be a starving artist, but she's an artist. All right, continue on. Between the ages of 7 and 11, children begin to make social comparisons and consider how they're perceived by others. That right there. So that's what we're seeing nowadays. You know that, Ed, right? A lot of these kids, and I say kids, you look at the ages, as they grow further, but it's between that ages of 7 and 11, and they're starting to have that social comparison, and they're defining who they are, and basically they're segregating themselves from other people because they may not think they're good enough, or they're too good, or this or that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then this is where this is where it says that you start realizing, like, I'm a little more athletic than the rest of these kids, but this is also where you get them kids with that inflated self-image, and now we're looking at possible egomaniacs later. So you got to be careful here too. But this is where it starts to separate. This is where you start seeing, especially here, I can remember, believe it or not, this is where I start getting picked last for dodgeball because it just ain't that good. I don't pay attention during dodgeball and I get hit in the face. But this is that age, but this is also around the age, not really basketball just yet. My dad was still beating me up on the basketball court around this age. So, but this is where you start seeing that who's more athletic, who's the smart kid, in class. And we start picking on the smart kid, of course. No, don't do that.
No, that's bullying. Come on. No, but I mean, in a sense, you think about it, that's where that ideal self, like it's what you're wanting versus what your actual self-image is. And this is where, that you want to kind of get an even keel type thing. So adolescence is a key period for self-concept. The self-concept established during adolescence is usually the basis for the self-concept for the remainder of one's life. During the adolescent years, people experiment with different roles, personas, and selves. For adolescent, self-concept is influenced by success in areas they value and the responses of others valued to them. Success and approval can contribute to greater self-esteem and a stronger self-concept into adulthood. When I read that, what came to mind was everyone gets a trophy type situations.
Okay.
And I will tell you that has created a massive problem in today's society, because you think about it, right? So self-concept is influenced by success in areas they value and the responses of others valued to them. So when I give every single kid a trophy that's in an entire league, they get this idea that everyone deserves a trophy.
Right.
When really, whoever wins first place should be the one who gets a trophy, or everyone gets a prize. Not everyone gets a prize, Not everyone makes the same amount of money. And that's where I think we see a lot of this whole, where people talk about entitlement. That's where it comes from. It's that inflated self-concept done because, as I would say it, and I think it's kind of like our generations, Ed, that have done this. We've given because we think they deserve it, and it's like, did they really earn it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And and getting them to value it.
And of course, the other problem is, so now the first time they experience failure isn't on a basketball court playing city league at 16 years old. It's, when they fail an event on the Army physical fitness test at 18 years old at basic training. This is the first time he experiences or she experiences failure. And then that's a whole nother can of worms, because you just gave them a shot to their self-esteem that they've never experienced before.
Maybe it's that, well, I've always thought I was good enough type attitude. Well, no, sometimes you it's not just good enough. You got to be better, right? MRT, right? We've talked about it before, Master Resilience Trainer.
Yep.
Overall, that was designed to help people learn to deal with things, right, Ed?
Yeah, to overcome things. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But throughout the years before that, did we really have that?
I'm a early 90s soldier, and I don't recall anything like this. We were taught to get over things by grabbing a big cup of suck it up and move on.
Yeah. Well, but in a sense, though, I think about it, and I'm not knocking, I don't want to knock the program at all, because I do think there are elements of that program I truly like, because I've already been doing those things. It's just funny that other people didn't realize how to do it.
I think there are circumstances that you're right on. So those earlier generations of soldiers also suck it up and drive on, and then they end up with mental health problems much later down the road. Shell shock is nothing but today's PTS, or PTSD is what they're currently calling it, but there is a movement to take disorder out of it. But that's all shell shock was. But these dudes were also, coming back from these wars and just sucking it up and then committing suicide or killing somebody else. So
right,
there are things that I think MRT is a good tool for some of that. But I just think, honestly, I don't think there's buy-in into the program like there should be. I think it would be a better program if there's more buy-in. There just isn't. Everybody considers it the program for how to hug a soldier, and that's just not what it is. But
I'm definitely in agreement with you. What we're actually happening to show people how to deal with things a little bit better. Now, could past generations have used that and to get through things? Oh, absolutely, probably so. But that's the thing, is we don't know because they didn't have it then. My thing is I think we set them up for failure, but not allowing to have to deal with stuff earlier in life. And so now it doesn't compile into the smallest, what you and I may see as the smallest thing. It's gargantuan to them, and we have to help them through that. And don't get me wrong, I love helping somebody through things and to help them, do all the things they need. But at the same time, I feel like if we, and I deal with this with my son, teaching him that the world has not ended because there's no electricity in the house and you can't play a video game. But yeah, definitely, success and approval can definitely be contributed to greater self-esteem and a stronger self-concept into adulthood. So in final, how our own self-concept can influence the behavior of others. And that's where this all falls back on. So we started on influence starts with self-concept. Well, now we're going to go into basically how it affects the behaviors of others. People generally treat other people as they are permitted. Self-concept plays a significant role in how other people will view and treat us. All right, that's it. I think that falls along also the lines of treat people the way I want to be treated. The whole golden rule, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that's what I think of when I read that too. Is the golden rule. Yeah. Treat others as you would want to be treated. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. This is where the common advice of fake it till you make it applies. Who was it? Was this somebody that we listened to, Ed, where they called fake? Oh, I know who it was. Never mind. It was Gary Vaynerchuk. He talks about fake it till you make it. He said that's phony. There's no such thing. And I'm like, oh, okay. Fake it till you make it. But then again, yeah. I mean, I've done it myself where I act like I knew what I was doing until I actually realized what was supposed to be done. So I don't know. I'm kind of up in the air about that.
Yeah, I've actually given that advice to my daughter. She was working at a grocery store and she was getting a few complaints because she wasn't smiling, which is ridiculous. And I told her, I said, just smile at work, fake it till you make it. Like, just, for the customers, put on a show. And in the back of your mind, you could be thinking, you're so rude. You such a jerk. I said, just don't verbalize it. That's all.
Hey, that's it, man. Wow. So a person who defines themselves as incompetent or unreliable is likely to be viewed that way by others, regardless of how true this may be. If a person's self-concept includes these views, they will likely talk about themselves in that way. They may also fall into patterns of behavior that confirm this view because they have accepted that this behavior is who they really are. Man, I've seen that before. Haven't you, Ed?
I've seen this a lot in the military where people are like joke around about being lazy, and then they eventually evolve into where they are kind of lazy. And initially they may not be. It may just be like, ha ha ha, yeah, I just sat in my office all day today and I just played whatever Golf Clash, and then it just evolves because they keep saying it. But then on the outside looking in, that supervisor hears you talking like that, even though it's not even true, but you're putting that thought into their mind that maybe you are stealing company time because you are playing video games on your phone when you're at work. So it could put a negative look on you.
Yeah. So in my past, I had, it's funny how things are worded here. And I think about in the past, I had a guy once used to say, oh, I don't care. I don't care. Right. And he would say it a lot, but his actions didn't display that, not all the time. But then I started noticing like this like steadily decline. It's like a little bit, just a little bit and a little bit, just kind of turning him into an I don't care person. And we were months down the road, many months. I think it was, goodness, probably 2.5 years. And I noticed it really, really was, I don't care anymore. And I confronted him. And I think my problem was, when I think about this, is I probably should have said something to him much earlier on. And I find myself saying that now to people, but I should have said something earlier on, because literally he was, and at the end, before he got out, was an I don't care person. And he just had this horrible negative attitude. And I'm like, man, I should have like involved myself sooner and just said, no, you do care. Look at all that you do. You're an amazing person. You care. Keep caring, man. Mm-hmm. If I'd have done something like that, I think it would have been different,
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. If you interact and maybe you open their eyes, they see that they're better than that. And maybe when they're doing their own self-reflection, it'll come through like, Brian said this.
Yeah.
And he's right.
Yeah.
I am better than that. So
yeah, exactly. So given the evidence they are presented with, other people will often share this person's view of themselves. That is, unless they are a close friend or family member who sees this person in an entirely different way to how they see themselves. So that falls right into what I was talking about there. That can also work to be the positive. A person who believes in themselves and puts forward a strong sense of self-worth is more likely to be treated positively. The person who emanates confidence in themselves is more likely to inspire confidence in other people, particularly if they can back up their claims with actions and results. I was thinking about, Ed, where you mentioned about that soldier that works in the orderly room. That describes that person right there, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think that describes her, because like I said, she just, her positive nature just rubs off. And, even if like, so I asked her to email me all the scorecards for the Army physical fitness test for my group of people. And she didn't. And then 2 days later, she still hadn't. Well, I could have flew off the handle like she blew me off. But because of that, how positive she always is, I just called her and said, hey, I think you might have forgot. Could you shoot me an email with these in there? And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I did forget. No problem. Where if I had called and started screaming, like, where am I getting with that? So I thought that's a good example. It got me some positive results. I mean, I got them. It wasn't a big deal. Nobody was shooting at me. I didn't need them right away, but eventually I did. And she's a busy person. So, okay, you forget. It happens.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, but that's the thing though, is you kind of reinforced it with her too, you know? Congruence puts the individual in a place where they understand exactly what they have to offer to the world. It can positively and negatively affect not only the way a person treats themselves, but how the rest of the world will treat them. So, really, overall, when you think about the whole concept of self-concept, and then, having self-esteem, self-image, and ideal self involved, how you can convey who you are to others can help change their mentality.
Yes.
You can influence others through your behaviors and how, and then they change their behaviors. Positive affirmation. That's one of the things. Gary Chapman has a book. He did the 5 love languages. He also does the 5 languages of affirmation in the workplace. A wonderful book. Unbelievable. Because you learn how to treat people a certain way, and they will treat you back that way.
Yeah, this is a good one too. So, at one point at the academy, because of who recommended me to work there, I was looked kind of down upon, I felt like, whether it was accurate or not. But then through how I worked once I got healthy and through my actions, I tried to put a spin on it. And at the end, when that one person retired, I feel like we had a different kind of relationship than we did when I first got there. And I think it was basically what you're saying right here. Just my own self-concept, my self-image, and who I wanted to be at the academy drove that change.
Yeah. And the thing is, though, it keeps driving it, though. Even though you stepped away from that particular role, you've carried aspects that you've built into your self-concept from then. And I think it's allowing you, and me too, to become the better NCO that we are, within our roles and responsibilities. I mean, that's kind of like how I see it, but
yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. All it did is helped us grow.
Yeah, definitely. So let's see here. We always give a task, and tasks come in many forms and shapes and sizes. Of those 6, and I'll label them out, all right? So there's the 6 traits that you can group together to help work on your own self-concept: physical, social, family, competence, academic, and effect. Pick 2, and then you tell us how you could use those 2 to help build your own self-concept. All right. I think because to me, I think what happens is that allows also others to kind of see that self-concept or that ideal image, or basically we can see that within you. And that's an influence, and that starts that whole influence of, not fixing, but updating your self-concept in a sense, and it will influence others to want to do the same, at least. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Absolutely. All right. So like always, we are so happy to have you all listening to us. We're very happy with the numbers and how things are going. And it's really not about the numbers, because even if it's just one person listening and they're gaining knowledge, like that makes me happy, because at least, somebody's getting something from it. But do us a favor. Go on to the Facebook page, 101 Influence in your search bar. Click on the blue button that says Visit Group. Answer those 3 questions and become a part of our closed Facebook group if you've not already been. If you are part of the Facebook group, why don't you go ahead and share that with somebody else who is not a part of it already, and they can become a part of it, right? So we create influence by doing these little small tasks, and that's just another way, because all of a sudden, you've just influenced somebody to listen in, and maybe they have influenced somebody, and then so on and so forth. To me, that's how the thing grows. And it doesn't have to be the concepts we're always talking about. I mean, you could pick and choose what you want, where you feel like you need, to maybe build your self-concept. I don't know. We've talked about things like toxic influence. We've talked things about communicating influence. We've talked about influencing change. We had a great conversation about emotional intelligence. We've had great conversations with other people. But if you can take any of those elements and you can use those to help somebody else become a better person, well, that's the right direction we want to go with being a good instinctive influencer. Other than that, definitely check that out. Check out the website, www.instinctiveinfluencer.com. We're on Twitter, and we're also on Instagram, and you can find us both on LinkedIn. Do you have anything else for the audience there, Ed?
No, I think we got another good one. Another good one in the queue here today, Brian.
Yeah, I'm definitely I'm pretty excited too, because we've got some things coming up. I put down some notes. I sent them to Ed not too long ago, and these are just ideas for other shows. Influence, influence is, you already heard us do that before, but we want to do one about mentorship maybe. How does our field of view influence us and others? So when I talk about field of view, picture if you're on a Google Maps, right, and you're looking in satellite view and you scroll in, you get way, way down. But if you scroll out, you can see the larger view, larger picture. So how does our influence seen in different fields of view? And then influence through history. You like the other ones? Yeah, you like the history one. I want to do at least 3 episodes of different historical things, because Ed is the man when it comes to history. He knows his stuff.
Ish.
And then
put an ish on that.
Nah, man. Yeah, you've got a pretty good. Maybe that's where we need Shumney to come in too, I guess, to help out. But so and a couple other things is we want to kind of take some of the Army's training styles or the Army's lessons learned that we've learned and try to kind of help others understand it to be able to use it, whether it be in the Army and not in the Army. So one of them is like basically how to use the 8-step training model. I mean, it's very effective if you use it properly. If you don't use it properly, then, well, it's not so effective. Or basically troop leading procedures. What we call troop leading procedures, it could also be used at a business. It just depends upon how they use it. What does the label servant leadership really mean? Because I think there's like this idea of what it is, but I'm not really sure people understand, and obviously we have our general idea of what we think it is too, and it might not be what somebody else thinks. Also, I wanted to see us get into a conversation about red teaming. Ed and I have done extensive looks at red teaming and understanding red teaming. I think that plays a big role in influence and influencing others. Performance evaluations. There's multiple types of performance evaluations. What I think we could do is we could kind of take what we have in the Army and offer it up as just more advice for others to look to do their performance evaluations. Influence during crisis management. To me, that's a big one, because I mentioned earlier about somebody sees something is really important and other people don't see it, but crisis management in general, I remember one of my classes during my bachelor's program was completely about all crisis management. And I was just like, wow, I didn't realize how in depth this is. So I definitely want to look at that. And then I think one that kind of strikes a chord with us in the service because of the light that is always shined upon it, that we really need to kind of focus on. And Ed will probably agree with this big time, is how can we be an advocate against sexual assault? That's an influence. That's definitely an influencer one. It falls along the same lines as the suicide show, but I want to look at that and how can we become advocates to fight against such a thing?
Wow.
So what are your thoughts, Ed?
Yeah, I think we got some good stuff on tap coming up, and yeah, it could be some of those are a little deep. Some of them are going to be fun. I think we got some good messages, and I think the listeners will really enjoy them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And plus we have all the influences topics. There's about 52 of those. So we've got a work cut out for us, my friend. All right. With that, I don't want to keep you on air too long. Thank you very much for listening in. I am Brian.
And I am Ed.
And this has been the Instinctive Influencers podcast. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.